And welcome back to The Wrap. Well, Republicans are blasting the Obama administration for taking Cuba off the State Department's blacklist of countries that sponsor terrorism. In a sharply worded statement, Speaker John Boehner says, and we quote, "The Obama administration had handed the Castro regime a significant political win in return for nothing. The communist dictatorship has offered no assurances it will address its long record of repression and human rights abuses at home, nor has it offered any indication it will cease its support for violence throughout the region." At the State Department today, a spokesman says that taking Cuba off the terror list is not connected to efforts to normalize relations with the communist island.
The review of Cuba's designation as a state sponsor of terror was instructed by the President, and we have had a separate process of discussions with the Cuban government about reestablishing diplomatic relations and reopening embassies. So we see these as separate.
Now, meanwhile, Jeb Bush, a likely 2016 candidate, said the move was further evidence that the president is more interested in, quote, capitulating to our adversaries than in confronting them. You remember, President Obama joked about Cuba just a few weeks ago at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Look at my Cuba policy. The Castro brothers are here tonight. Welcome to America, amigos. ¿Qué pasa? What? It's the Castros from Texas? Oh. Iowa Queen. Hi, Julian.
Well, Speaker Boehner says this is a win for the Castro brothers. Is he right, John Fund?
Cuba may have ended state-sponsored terrorism and support for terrorism, but largely because it now controls Venezuela. The Cuban secret police basically call the shots in Venezuela with the Chavista government there. Venezuela is certainly still a problem in the region. And just ask the Colombians, who are some of our closest allies. The Venezuelans are continuing to try to subvert them. So to say that Cuba should no longer be on the list is a distinction without a difference, because the Cubans basically run the Venezuelan secret police and military.
Is John Boehner right in the sense where we continue to seemingly negotiate with rogue nations like Iran or Cuba, and we give up our leverage without asking for anything in return? In other words, what did the U.S. get here for taking them off of this list?
We got about 42 political prisoners released a little early, I think. I'm still waiting for the rest of the deliverables. I don't see any.
We're getting a lot more. Look, you know, the speaker, I think, embarrasses himself when he makes a speech like that and he starts talking about that they're fomenting violence in the region. No, they aren't, and they haven't in I don't know how many years.
The Venezuelan proxies they are.
Yeah, you know what? First of all, that's not the region, and secondly, it's not. South America is not exactly off the coast of Florida. So
again, a distinction without a difference.
I guess you can say they're fomenting it in somewhere. You know, it's just not what he said. But even worse, it's so silly. If you believe in our system, if you believe in free enterprise, what better way to make the point in Cuba than to give them a dose of it? We're going to get a lot back in terms of trade, in terms of relationships. It is so time to do this. But even worse, when he says things like that, and when Jeb Bush says things like that, all they're doing is saying, you know, we're from such an old generation, that old generation that had this big problem with Cuba because there were missiles put in there once by the Soviets that don't exist anymore. It's ridiculous. We should have changed this policy a long time ago. We're finally doing it. It's a darn good thing, if for no other reason than I can finally get the cigars I like.
Well, that's one positive out of this, Jonathan.
I think that they're focusing too much on this terror thing and not enough on the intelligence. I mean, Cuba is one of the biggest collectors of intel off of the United States that there is. I mean, they're high on the list, and they not only collect information for themselves, but really they do it for a lot of the other communist countries out there. And you know, I was in Venezuela a year ago and doing a protection detail, and I got detained by some of their intel guys, and I'm here to tell you that they're well trained. It's no joke that what they're doing.
Would you have taken them off the terror list if you were running the show?
I would seriously be looking at what we're gaining versus what we're, where Rick says we're gaining stuff versus the threat from the intelligence part of the House.
Okay, well, let's switch now to a developing story out of Phoenix. Increased police security is on hand for an anti-Muslim protest outside of a local mosque tonight. The protest will include a Draw Muhammad contest, they're getting big these days, similar to the one held in Texas earlier this month, where 2 ISIS-inspired men were shot and killed after opening fire on police. Here's the organizer of tonight's rally and a man who's organizing a counter-rally.
If we don't counter that message that, hey, a lot of us in Arizona don't believe that, then the world will think that about Arizona.
All right, guys, quickly, do you agree with holding these sort of drawing Muhammad contests, and are they only inviting violence when they tell the people that are attending to come armed?
I got in a lot of trouble with the Pamela Geller thing from First Amendment,
point of view.
Yeah, and listen, I defended the First Amendment, and I believe that people should be able to say and do what they want. But I think 2 things: one, personal responsibility. You don't have to go out and harass people that may not be a part of any terrorist thing, to get your point across. And 2, if you are going to do something like this, it's just completely reckless. You need to make sure that the public is secure, and that's what nobody does during these things.
Because they want it to happen.
Rick, are we going to see trouble tonight, you think?
You probably will, because the organizers telling people to come with their guns and be ready. Look, I actually saw that gentleman who's leading the anti-protest earlier and heard his full comments, and he put it so well. He said, look, I believe deeply in the First Amendment, acknowledge their right to do this, and then he said, but I also believe in good judgment, good taste, and good sense. And he put it beautifully.
Jonathan, last word?
I wish the PR component of this wasn't present. It's obvious that the organizers of this are after PR for whatever purposes, and their message is drowned out by their desire for showmanship.
Yeah, well, there'll certainly be a lot of PR around this tonight if something bad happens, that's for sure. Coming up next, will Hillary run or hide from President Obama's economic record? And we'll talk about Bill's big win at a charity fundraiser. Don't go anywhere.